Okay, good evening. Welcome to a regular meeting of council for Monday, October 18th. And we're going to stand for the rendition of O Canada and then a moment of personal reflection and a moment to honor Sandy Bellows, regional councillor who has passed away. Thank you.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command, car ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Today is Persons Day, and it was a day that white women were officially declared persons and got to vote in Canada. And that happened a number of years ago. And today we lost an amazing woman with the passing of Sandy Bellows last week. She was given a very moving tribute today at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre. And on behalf of her family, I'd just like to say thank you to all the people who came out. There was a number of councillors, many community members, and many friends and family from Sandy Bellows. And she was honored at the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, and it was a fitting way to say thank you to such a kind, caring, and compassionate person. Sandy was a survivor in the truest sense. She overcame so much with courage and grace, and as a regional councillor and former city councillor, Sandy was one of the most hardworking councillors, always looking out for her residents. I will miss her smile, as each of us will, her positive energy, her belief in the best of people, and her team approach to everything. She was loved by many people, including me and my family, and our thoughts of council are with her family today and in this very challenging time. And on behalf of the City of St. Catharines, I offer my condolences to Sandy's sons, Colton and Spencer, and all of their family. And I would like to give a special thanks to Councillor Harris, who has been working since Sandy's passing with Spencer and Colton to help organize both the funeral and the First Ontario Performing Arts Celebration of Life for Sandy. So thank you, Councillor Harris, for stepping up. I also want to offer condolences to Brent White's family, and he was the president of Garden City Minor Hockey, longtime coach and baseball coach as well, and he's been the president of the association for the past 5 years, and he was an outstanding individual, giving of himself to helping kids do what they want to do best, which is play. There was a celebration of Brent's life held at JC Park. And I want to thank our staff, our park staff, for attending to the park in such a beautiful way. A lot of kids came out and their parents to support Brent and his family. And in that park, we were able to gather and share stories and talk about Brent's impact on so many kids' lives. He coached travel hockey as well. And he was more than just a coach. He was a mentor. He was a friend. He was a shoulder to lean on. And to his wife and his 2 young boys, our hearts go out to them as well. And I want to give a special thanks to Lori Membella and her team. They worked very closely with Brent and his team when it comes to ice allocation in our community. And it's a loss that they will feel as well, because all Brent ever wanted to do was make sure that there was enough ice available so that the kids could play. And ultimately, that's what he wanted, was to see kids play. So hearts go out to the White family. And Whitey Frick, condolences to the families and to the friends and family of Whitey Frick, who passed away at the age of 95. Whitey was a longtime member of lacrosse community with St. Catharines Old Boy Lacrosse Association, and as a junior and senior athletics. Whitey coached and refereed at every level for the Minto Cup, President Cup, the Man Cup, and professional lacrosse. He was inducted into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame for his contributions. He also played Junior B and Junior A hockey, and in 2002 was presented with the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal for his service to our community. He is remembered as someone who was always very generous with his time, and he was an amazing athlete. So we lost 3 people in our community, all of whom had a role to play in making our community a better place. And so our thoughts are with all the families as they go through this challenging time. I also want to talk just a bit about the Harriet Tubman statue, and I know I'm not the only one who felt angry about the vandalism to the Harriet Tubman statue last week. This was an extremely upsetting act of vandalism that was a major blow to the BME Church and our community as well. It is a nationally recognized historic site, and I've spoken with Rochelle Bush from the BME Church and offered our city's support to make sure that the statue is rebuilt, and we will continue to share and celebrate Harriet's legacy. The church is accepting donations to help pay for the replacement of the statue, so you can go to the GoFundMe page, created by Black Owned 905. I also want to say thank you to the Niagara Regional Police for quickly resolving this investigation. I also want to say congratulations to Dr. Stobie and David Van Velzen and the entire team at Reach Niagara on a successful partnership with TELUS Health, bringing a new mobile health clinic to St. Catharines. Launched in early October, this clinic on wheels provides primary medical treatment, mental health services, addiction support, and COVID-19 screening for those who most need it, the marginalized in our community. This clinic will help ensure that homeless and people who are struggling through traumas in their life have access to care and to help them be well and recover. And I also want to give a thanks to Electra for supporting this project and always being a great community supporter. Dr. Stobie is doing an outstanding job in our community. This was only one of 13 vehicles available in Canada. It shows the level of innovation and approach to dealing with significant challenges by those who are enduring homelessness in our community. So Dr. Stobie is a great asset to our community. This weekend was the annual Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, and a lot of us completed the walk in honor of somebody. I was with my daughter Ella, and we walked the piers in Port Dalhousie in honor of Sandy and Sandy Bellows. It was great to hear that the walk raised more than $125,000 for Jillian's Place, so I just want to thank all the men, the boys, the families that walked a mile in her shoes across our community. And this funding will help to ensure that women and children have a safe haven to escape domestic violence. This is also Small Business Week here in Niagara, and a lot of small businesses have struggled through the pandemic. And as I've said this many, many times, businesses are the backbone of our economy. The entrepreneurs, the creators, the investors, the employers that make up our community. Over the course of this next week, I'll be visiting many local businesses with our economic development team, helping to shine a light on local business in St. Catharines. And I encourage everyone to do the same thing. Shop local, shop local, shop local. At the same time, also share local on your social media feeds. Last week, I also sent a letter to Premier Ford urging the province to lift restrictions and allow restaurants to operate at full capacity. St. Catharines is home to more than 550 restaurants that employ almost 4,000 people, bringing tremendous economic value and sharing their talent and culinary crafts with us. So as we celebrate Small Business Week, I only hope that capacity restrictions will be lifted so the restaurants can operate at full capacity. We have budget engagement coming up. We have a lot of engagement that's taking place. We have the open houses online through Zoom, and that's October 25th for residents from the north side of the city, wards 3, 5, and 6. And on Wednesday the 27th for the south side, wards 1, 2, 3. The annual telephone town hall will take place on Tuesday, October 26th. And if you want to talk about budget, you can sign up at Budget Talk for the meeting or the telephone town hall to share your feedback. You can also review the budget, share your feedback on Engage STC. There's a lot of engagement around our budget. I'm proud of the city and how we try to engage as many people as possible when it comes to the budget of our community. And I'd just like to say we have a last meeting for a couple people. So this was Julie Rorson's last meeting. She has been the chief of staff in my office for the past 5 of the last 6 years. She is moving on to Metrolinx, and we wish her all the well. She's done an amazing job here at the City of St. Catharines. She's passionate about St. Catharines, and she has been a very integral part of where we've gone as a community, helping to work with council and our staff to ensure that we're all aligned on the direction that we wanted to go. So best wishes to Julie Rorson and her move, as well as tonight is Fire Chief Jeff McCormick's last council meeting as he begins his retirement. Chief McCormick joined the city in 2017 as deputy chief, becoming acting chief for more than 2 years, and then in 2019 was promoted to fire chief. He came to St. Catharines after a long and rewarding career in fire services, teaching, and very quickly became a valuable part of the senior leadership team. The hiring of the new fire chief is underway, and it will be announced in the next few weeks ahead. And I want to thank Deputy Chief Upper for stepping up. And so I'm going to allow Chief to say a few words, but before I do, I just want to say I had an opportunity to travel with the Chief. The Chief is, I'm just going to call him Jeff. He's an outstanding person. He really does care about the communities that he serves. He cares about his firefighters. He cares about fire services. He's probably one of the most knowledgeable people that I've got to work with, not just when it comes to the approach to fire services, but also approach to sort of corporate integration of all things that make a company a strong company. Jeff and I played hockey. We played hockey, at least I tried to play. Jeff was much better than I was. But we got to spend time out of the room, out of the office, on the ice. And he is just an outstanding person, a great human being. And he really stepped up during COVID as well. So this is a tough one for us, but I know Jeff's going home to be with his family and help to look after some family members. And the one thing that I'll take away is that Jeff and I got to go up to a First Nations to take up a fire truck to help deliver a fire truck from the City of St. Catharines to Lac Seul. And we got to spend some time up there and with the Indigenous community. And it was an honor to be able to do something like that with Jeff. And while he won't brag, because he can't, I caught more fish than he did. So I will now turn it over to Chief McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been an absolute pleasure to have spent the last of my career here in the City of St. Catharines, working with some great people, some great men and women here at Fire Services, some great people at the senior leadership team, and certainly the 2 councils that I've spent time with. Everybody that I know here in St. Catharines is truly interested in serving this community as best we possibly can. And my career has certainly been made easier being surrounded with such a fantastic team. So thank you for all the kind and wonderful words, Mr. Mayor. They truly are appreciated. And I want to offer you and council and the rest of the team here at St. Catharines all the best as you go forward. So thank you for making this a very special night for me.
Everyone turn off your mics and clap. Well done, Chief. Okay, do you want to say anything to the CAO? You good? You're good? All right. So I stole all your thunder? Okay.
I'll catch Jeff on his actual last day. And
Okay, fair enough. So following adoption of the agenda, the following items have been placed in Sugar Sync. I'll turn that over to the clerk because she usually reads this. To the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. You have a confidential memo in Sugar Sync from the Deputy City Clerk regarding vacancy appointment to Fallen Firefighters Memorial Task Force, and that's the only changes to this evening's agenda.
Okay, motion to amend the agenda. Councillor Dodge, seconded by Councillor Phillips. All in favor? That's carried. We have minutes from September 22nd and October 4th. One was the budget meeting, September 22nd. Can I have a motion to move? Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Dodge. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Conflicts of interest. I do have a conflict of interest on item 7.1, so I'll be declaring that today. Involves property matter. No other conflicts. Okay, we now move to the consent. So we have the following that have been pulled off consent. 6.2, 2020 Community Improvement Plan. 6.3, comparator research on remuneration for council members appointed to hydro boards, standing committees, and outside boards and commissions. Before we go to the consent agenda, 6.2, Councillor Garcia, is it a question or do you want to change and add a motion or?
I have some questions, Mr. Mayor, and I won't necessarily be changing anything, but I wanted to discuss it with staff, and I have discussed it with some of the staff already. But do
you want to just do it now, so that because if you're not going to change the motion, you want to ask your questions, and we can leave it on consent. We can vote on it if you want to do that now, because I don't know if anybody else has questions on 6.2. Do you? Okay, we'll leave it on discussion then. We'll move it to 6.2. That's just because you're not changing the motion. I thought if we can get a question out of the way and then we can move it, that's fine. Okay, so those two have been pulled off of consent, and that leaves 6.1 and 6.4 on consent. And can I have a motion to move the consent agenda? Councillor Kushner and Councillor Phillips, and I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this evening's consent agenda. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Okay, so now we'll go to item number 7, public meeting 7.1, and Deputy Mayor Dodge will come up and I will exit the platform.
Just let me see here. Yeah, I think so. So 7.1. Notice of consideration regarding the recommendation to stop up and close part of McKay Street lying east of Hillview Road, part of PIN 46172-0430 LT. Realty file number 2104 has been published in accordance with the City of St. Catharines Notice of Bylaw. The public meeting will proceed as follows. Members of the public were provided with options to submit written correspondence regarding this evening's public notice. No items of written correspondence were submitted. Oh dear. Members of the public wishing to speak to the item were advised to RSVP with the Office of the City Clerk by 9 a.m. on Monday, October 18th, in order to speak. No one requested to speak. The public meeting will be closed. Council will then consider the recommendation for this item. So we will now commence the public meeting. No one has registered to speak for this public meeting. Does staff have any closing comments? No? Okay. Can I have a mover to close the public meeting? Councillor Kushner and Councillor Porter. Can I have a councillor to move the recommendation in this report? Councillor Kushner, Councillor Miller. Okay, we have a motion that council declare surplus a portion of McKay Street lying east of Hillview Road, Township Plan 94. The lands is known on Appendix 1 attached hereto, and the council authorize the stopping up and closing of a portion of McKay Street lying east of Hillview Road, Township Plan 94, part of PIN 46172-0430 LT, as shown as Appendix 1, and that public notice in accordance with Bylaw 2007-310 be provided, and the public be given the opportunity to object to stop up and close prior to the passing of the bylaw, prior to consideration of this report, and that council authorize the disposal of the lands to the abutting property owners Walter Senzik and Mary Jane Johnson, subject to the terms and conditions outlined in camera report FMS 1682021, and that council waive sections 4.6 and 4.7 of bylaw 2007-309 relating to notification of Niagara Region and school boards and placing of a for sale sign listing the property on local real estate board, and further that the city solicitor be directed to prepare the necessary bylaws. And I now look to the clerk to call the recorded vote.
Point of order.
Oh, sorry.
Aren't we discussing this?
Okay. If you have any questions, you can ask your questions first.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, there is a motion on the floor. Did you have questions of the motion?
Thank you, Clerk. I think I have questions of the procedure. I thought this was an in-camera matter.
The in-camera matter is at the end of the evening. This particular report is twofold. There's an in-camera portion, and this is the public portion to stop up and close.
This is a public meeting.
Yeah, this is the
point of order. I'm just wondering, it's Matt speaking, Councillor Matt, wouldn't we close the public meeting because there was no speakers, and then the recommendation would come out of in camera?
There's two separate reports, and I will have the city planner explain. Is Christine Douglas here?
Thank you. Through the Deputy Mayor to the Council. So this is a two-step process. So before we can proceed with the discussion of the in-camera report, we need to hold this public meeting to declare this portion of unused roadway as surplus, and also to stop up and close it. So that's the purpose of this point in the meeting. Then once this council has their deliberations on this, then the second part will be having the discussion about the discussions with regards to the negotiations of the particular purchase and sale of the property to the individuals mentioned in the report.
Thank you. But if I look at the staff recommendation, the individuals are named 4 paragraphs down. So if we authorize disposal of the lands, it is to those people. Is that correct?
Through you, that's correct.
Are there any further questions?
Yeah. Perhaps I could assist with regards to the disposal of the lands. Under our land disposal proceeds, these are lands that are to the abutting property owner. The lands would not be able to be sold to another party because they are going to the abutting property owner.
Councillor Kushner?
For clarification, I can understand why it's somewhat confusing. I thought the in-camera portion would deal with the price and potential buyers. And if that's the case, I share the concern that the potential buyers should not be part of this motion.
Can staff clarify that?
Can I? Through you, Deputy Mayor, the names are always made public, or that every time we have a public meeting, when we stop up and close land, it's the in-camera portion that we discuss, but the names are public. It's a public meeting.
Okay, I would have thought they'd become public after we discuss the sale to the abutting property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? I'll look to the clerk to call the question.
On the motion before you, Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
No.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And that's carried.
So there are no presentations and declaration to all presenters. Council chambers in all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. The many acts that govern us understand the necessity of a collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and seek opinions into very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, the public to have an opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's ability or their dignity in our chambers. So we'll just have to wait for a moment. I think the mayor's coming back in before we move on.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dodge. Appreciate it. And we've got discussion item now, and we have a presentation that is forthcoming. And I got my notes here. All right, and just a bit of a preamble, because we do have a discussion that will be taking place. October is Islamic Heritage Month, a time to recognize the contributions of Muslim people in our communities, our country, and civilization. For all of us, it is time to learn about the long-standing Islamic history and its leaders, and it is also important to combat racism and anti-Islamophobia. Last week, I hosted Zakia Hamdamani on my Insta Live for a chat about Islamic Heritage Month, and we had a great chat. Tonight, she is here joined by Rizwan Mohammed to present recommendations from the National Council of Canadian Muslims from the National Summit on Islamophobia that was held a couple of months ago. And I will turn it over to Zakia. Do you want to start? And then
I sure can. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Zakia. Nice to see you again.
Yes, you as well. Thank you, and good evening, everyone, for inviting myself and Rizwan into this space and sharing this space with all of you tonight. As Mayor Senzik had said, I'm Zakia Hamdani, and I go by the pronouns she and her. I would like to start by saying that I believe it is very important to be able to bring your full self to gatherings. And so I would like to begin in a way how I would normally greet family and friends. And this is to say, Assalamu alaikum, which is how Muslims greet one another. And it means peace be upon each and every one of you today. Next slide, please. So my portion of today's presentation is to give you a local context by centering on those community members you serve. I will be sharing a brief overview of the Niagara Muslim community, the mosques, and the services they provide, as well as community needs, which will segue into the National Council of Canadian Muslims recommendations from the National Action Summit on Islamophobia. Next slide, please. So Muslim presence in the Niagara region can be traced back as early as the 1960s. And Muslims in Niagara originate from many different parts of the world. The Niagara Muslim community is very diverse, and ethnicities can range from the Middle East to South Asia, Africa, and even those who are born and raised in Canada or the US. The estimate of Muslims in the Niagara region is about 88,000, but we will have confirmation once the 2021 census comes out. Now, it is probably no surprise that Muslims in Niagara are underrepresented, and why it is so important for our community to continue to find ways to preserve our heritage and Islamic identity while continuing to be contributing citizens to this region. Now, as the Muslim population in Niagara increased, so did the need to find a space where Muslims could gather to pray, make friends, share experiences, and lean on one another for support. Next slide, please. So this led to the establishment of Niagara's first mosque through the dedication and vision of community members, and it was built in 1984 on Lions Creek Road. And on your screen there, that's the Islamic Society of Niagara Peninsula. Following that in 1994 was the St. Catharines Mosque, Masjid an-Nur, that was built. Then the Lebanese Muslim Society of Niagara Falls in Chippewa. As well, the Mosque Aisha, which we now have 2 locations, one in Niagara Falls and one in Thorold, and as well as the Peace Mosque, as well in Niagara Falls. We have 2 Islamic schools that service Muslim students, one in St. Catharines, which is the Niagara Islamic School, and another one within the Lebanese Muslim Society of Niagara Falls. Next slide, please. The establishment of all these mosques is to meet the spiritual, social, and educational needs of the diverse Muslim community and to support a strong Muslim identity while contributing to the prosperity of the larger Niagara community. As you can see on the slide, there are many services that we offer to our community. We have also been committed to fostering interfaith relations and building bridges of understanding within the greater community, being partners in supporting settling refugees to Niagara, allies in activism and community work, and supporting equity, inclusion, and anti-racism while providing advocacy and assistance with community, education, and social needs as well. Next slide, please. The Niagara community has been devastated by the ongoing and repeated acts of violence and discrimination towards Muslims within Canada and abroad. The impact of Islamophobia to the community has created fear, insecurity, a rise in mental health concerns, and at times a disassociation from their Muslim identity. And these are just to name a few. Anti-Muslim sentiment also has given rise to racial discrimination, verbal assaults, especially to racialized women who wear the hijab, cyberbullying, and also has been known to seep into workplaces and schools, creating a negative bias that continues to perpetuate oppressive practices. If we are truly committed to eradicating Islamophobia and other forms of hate towards marginalized groups, then we have to begin to build our cultural knowledge to dispel myths and biases towards those that are different from ourselves. Then we really need to look critically at our policies and practices, and rather than try to work within existing structures, rebuild new ones that are inclusive and anti-oppressive in practice. Tonight's presentation is not just about being aware of what we can do as a community, but what actions are necessary to create the conditions where everyone feels safe, has access to equal opportunities, and where hate will no longer be tolerated. I also know of both advisory committees, the equity inclusion, as well as the anti-racism committees, as part of the mayor's advisory committees that are supportive of the NCCM recommendations, and also has put forth a resolution to council to support calls to action in the wake of the London Islamophobia attack. This is not only a Muslim community initiative, but one in which we all own and make it into a collective effort. I would now like to pass the mic to Rizwan Mohammed, who's the advocacy officer in the Public Policy and Government Relations with the National Council of Canadian Muslims.
Thank you very much, Zakia. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors of the City of St. Catharines. My name is Rizwan Mohammed, and I'm an advocacy officer with the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the NCCM. We are an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that protects Canadian human rights and civil liberties, challenges discrimination and Islamophobia, builds mutual understanding, and advocates for the public concerns of Canadian Muslims. I want to thank Zakia again for laying out the context in which we're speaking, and if Evan can put up my one-page list of calls to action. What I'd like to do is walk everyone through this. Thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to draw your attention to the way that we're recommending action on two different kinds of Islamophobia. Violent Islamophobia, where people are physically attacked, like the hate-motivated attacks that resulted in the Quebec mosque shooting, in the horrific hate-motivated murder of Mohammed Aslam Zavis at the Toronto Mosque, the IMO, and the tragic hate-motivated attack on the Muslim family in London this past summer, after which we saw a national call to action. The NCCM was one of many civil society groups that made calls to action on the federal government, but the NCCM has advanced 61 recommendations addressing Islamophobia at federal, provincial, and municipal levels. But what I'd like to focus on is 7 recommendations for municipal governments to take action on Islamophobia. The first is to pass street harassment bylaws with ticketing authority. The city of Edmonton has recently passed such a bylaw, and several other municipalities across Canada are now in the process of speaking with us and other local community groups about looking at how this might work. We've noticed that in Edmonton, it wasn't only about protecting Muslims from hate-motivated attacks, but people who were being harassed on the basis of their race or other ways that they identify were also people that we were considering could be protected from these kinds of forms of harassment and bullying. In terms of systemic Islamophobia, we're calling on local governments to provide community funding for local anti-Islamophobia initiatives. We're calling for local governments to build anti-Islamophobia mayoral advisory groups. The City of Toronto, the City of Hamilton, and many other cities and towns, including the City of London, have been working with us to develop such councils and groups with a focus on anti-Islamophobia, but also to complement what's already happening. And we mentioned, Zakia mentioned the city's anti-racism advisory group and the city's equity and inclusion advisory group. We're really happy that these groups exist. We're aware that there's some Muslim representation along with other racialized community members on these advisory groups, and we'd love to support and strengthen these groups to advance. Perhaps one possibility could be a subcommittee of Muslims on the anti-racism advisory group that would specialize in Islamophobia and advising the city on how to address those things and to voice community concerns around these issues. We're also calling for public education campaigns to confront Islamophobia. We've seen really, really good results with collaboration from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, OCASI, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants and Refugees in Toronto, and the City of Toronto, where we work together on a Toronto for All public education campaign. We've seen this work in other municipalities of different sizes, like the town of Ajax, also had an Ajax for All campaign. And some campaigns that have happened in the past around anti-racism might be an opportunity for the city of St. Catharines to refresh those programs. And we'd be happy to be one of the community voices to consult on that. We're also calling on the municipal government to celebrate the history of Canadian Muslims. We really appreciate Mayor Senzik's acknowledgement of Islamic History Month or Islamic Heritage Month. We think there's a great opportunity to work with the local history museum on this as a venue and as a partner to sort of work with different community groups and figure out ways that we can highlight the achievements and contributions of Canadian Muslims, but also Muslims of the Niagara region. There's some amazing history, local history, with Muslims in Niagara if people would take some time to learn about it, and we'd be happy to help with that. We're also calling on investment in alternative measures to policing. This may not be immediately relevant for Niagara region. This is something that we're calling on municipalities that are finding that some residents on the basis of their race or ethnicity are being over-policed, to look at that and to find alternative solutions. If the City of St. Catharines doesn't have data on this, we would be recommending gathering data and doing a study to review this. And finally, I'll just end by pointing to a call that we're making to increase opportunities for young Canadian Muslims in city decision-making. At the City of Toronto, for example, you have the Black Youth Fellowship Program. You have the Muslim Youth Fellowship Program, where it's a leadership development opportunity. It's promoting civic engagement amongst young people, and it provides a part-time paid internship so that young people can work behind the scenes in a city councilor's office, for example, and learn the day-to-day business of running the city. I welcome your questions and further discussion about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zakia and Rizwan, for your presentations. And I'll look to Council if you have questions. Councillor Porter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really great to see you both. And Zakia and I go way back on organizing various events in the city. And I guess I am not Muslim and I'm a white person. And I just want to hear from you. It seemed to me that Islamophobia comes in waves, and it's sometimes, Trumpism seemed to have a major effect on politics in both the U.S. and Canada. And I felt that there was another wave of Islamophobia when Trump was running for office and got elected. I wonder if you could both speak to that and how what your experiences have been and what the experience in the community. I know that Zakia lives in St. Catharines. I don't know where the other presenter lives, but can you give us some feedback about what it's been like?
Rizwan, if you don't mind, I can start. Thank you, Porter, Councillor Porter. As always, it's great to see you as well. I agree with your statement in the sense that we have seen a rise, especially as I mentioned, towards racialized women who are visible in wearing the hijab. And so within our community, mentioned of insecurity of walking, taking a family stroll, being in public spaces, and why this work is so immediate and important, and how do we create those conditions for community members to feel safe. The one thing that we have been trying to address as well is the lack of reporting. And it is by no fault of anyone really. It is more of convincing our community that it is so important to report hate-related incidences and crimes. They don't always get reported either from lack of follow-up, don't feel that anything's really going to happen, want it just to go away, don't want to bring undue attention to them. And so I think that is an initiative that I think we really need to touch upon, is how do we get the community to speak out and communicate what's happening. Rizwan, if you wanted to comment as well.
Thank you, Zakia. Just to build off of what Zakia is saying, Councillor Porter, thank you for that observation. We've seen spikes in Islamophobia or hate-motivated verbal assaults and physical attacks against Canadian Muslims across Canada around its election cycles. So that's something that we're definitely looking at, is the ways in which political rhetoric and political polarization can contribute to spikes in Islamophobia, and also how media coverage of certain kinds of events and incidents involving Muslims domestically in the country or in terms of conflicts that are happening overseas can also lead to spikes at certain times in anti-Muslim sentiment and occasionally anti-Muslim attacks. For example, probably the most famous or infamous example of this that's going to go down in Canadian history in the 20th century at least, or the early 21st century, is Alexandre Bissonnette when he was being interviewed after he had engaged in a mass shooting, the worst mass shooting on a place of worship in Canadian history. He said that he had noticed that the federal government had announced welcoming more Syrian refugees, and that had flipped a switch for him. He used similar language to that, and he felt he had to do something to violently discourage that kind of policy. Now, we are anticipating a large number of Afghan refugees to the country that are going to be coming from a very difficult social context in which there's been a lot of conflict and fighting, and not a democratic government by any stretch of the word. So, some we can understand will be settling across southern Ontario, and are our communities prepared to deal with that? I think one thing I'll also add is that about underreporting, we know that the Niagara Regional Police Service and their diversity, equity, and inclusion, or the hate crimes unit, basically, that's sort of looking at, it's not called the hate crimes unit, but the diversity and inclusion unit. Their biggest challenge right now, in speaking to them, I've heard them say, is underreporting. We know Statistics Canada, and I'll recommend this, I'll just say this very briefly and stop. Statistics Canada's General Social Survey, the last one that we had, the most recent in 2019, indicated that out of 223,000 self-reported incidents of hate from Canadians, only 1% of those were reflected in police-reported hate crime statistics. So there's a massive disparity in reporting, and a lot of that has to do with local community members feeling like if they report, nothing particularly will happen. That's where there's an opportunity for the city to pass a bylaw around street harassment, because although it's not a perfect solution, it starts to set a new norm to sort of signal to the broader residents of St. Catharines and Niagara region that there's a municipal government, that there's local leaders who are willing to take action to do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm not sure if my colleagues were aware. Before I was a councillor, it was probably during Trump's initial campaign, and the federal Liberals got elected, and there's a Muslim MP from Mississauga who passed a simple motion. It wasn't even a law, it was a motion to just investigate Islamophobia. And this stirred up lots of hatred and controversy. And you could see various white supremacist groups reforming in Niagara. They came to City Hall. There was a group called the Soldiers of Odin. And there was not outright violent symbolism against Muslims, but lots of dog whistles. And lots of members of the community started to form coalitions to counter this on the street. And this happened several times in front of City Hall, and we had to organize in Niagara Falls, and we ended up having to organize way too many vigils after what happened in Quebec City and in other places. So it is a serious problem in Niagara. I will I will say this, I don't experience it myself, but I've heard from enough people, and if you talk to a woman who wears a hijab and ask, she will definitely have a story to tell. So I am in favor of looking at this bylaw. I know that members of our committees were looking at collecting data and statistics. This is very important for people, and I appreciate you both coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the presenters for excellent presentations. I'm certainly supportive of anything we can do to stop Islamophobia, and I just wanted to ask Mr. Mohammed, I believe, about the street harassment bylaws. I think you mentioned that other municipalities have instituted those, and I just wondered if you can elaborate on those, and I assume that applies to any kind of harassment, not just Islamophobia. It's something, obviously harassment is wrong, but.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Garcia. That's exactly the point that we want to get at. For example, I can share for any councillors or city staff that are interested afterwards, the language that is in the PDF of the bylaw from the City of Edmonton that sort of looks at people who are being verbally or physically harassed on the basis of their gender identity or gender expression, their racial identity, their ethnicity, their faith. So it's groups that are protected by the charter, by our charter, that have constitutional protections that are specified, and it's not specified that, you know, Islamophobia specifically is meant to be named in the bylaw. It's more about sort of pushing back against people who are being targeted because on the basis for discrimination on the basis of race and religion. Often you find in different public spaces, we're seeing this in different provinces and different municipalities, where somebody will be called a terrorist in such an aggressive and threatening manner, but police are sort of, they don't have the legislative backing to sort of do something at that point, especially if it's a one-off or if it's a first, if it's a first incident. So we're very concerned about this, and we're trying to think, you know, for example, in the city of Edmonton, one of the things, the way the language was framed for that bylaw was to also sort of look at the sort of perennial problem of sexual harassment and the catcalling that women were being, or people identifying as women were being subjected to. So we see this as not just about Islamophobia. We see this about promoting community safety and giving ticketing authority to law enforcement to be able to start to set up a check for this and to build towards a broader strategy for community safety that takes into account the changing demographics and the changing context of Niagara region. Does that answer your question, Councillor Garcia?
Yes, you did. And one more question, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that sometimes the victims don't complain because they feel nothing is going to happen. But is there also a factor where they may be relative newcomers and they don't feel comfortable complaining or feeling that they just arrived in the country not that long ago and now they're complaining?
Zakia, do you want to take this?
I sure can. Absolutely. Councillor Garcia, when newcomers come to Canada, they are very appreciative and very thankful, and they do not want it to be seen as a complaint or feel that they're being ungrateful. We see this not just in reporting, we see this in the education. I'm a teacher as well, so we see this in the education system where they take at face value as well everything the teacher says and does not question. So that is a great point that you brought up, and that's something that I know the Niagara Folk Arts works tirelessly to support newcomers, as well as letting them know their rights and supporting them in navigating when these things occur.
Thank you both very much.
Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've mentioned education, and in universities, young Muslims are very active in the decision-making of their student unions, etc. What happens after they graduate? do they remain active, or do they go back to non-activity?
Well, I can speak from experience. I was very active in my university days. I think it was a revival for me in my Muslim identity, where I felt, again, that I was able to bring my full self to the table. As well, after university, I continued to stay actively involved. I'm originally from London, Ontario, and moved to St. Catharines about 21 years ago. And so have been trying to continue. Now my experiences are, can't always say they're common, because it all depends on how youth, or how, as adults, how their community engagement has been received. I relatively have had positive experiences when it comes to engaging with community. I don't know if that's because I do put myself out there. I can't say that for youth nowadays that is an open arena for them to be involved. It involves a lot of convincing, a lot of recruitment and mentorship. And so I think that's the part on our community to instill in our youth that they can still make a difference. I mean, we see youth being active all over Ontario, in Canada with abroad. We know they have an important voice, and that's part of our job, is to kind of move out of the way so that they can proceed. Rizwan, I don't know if you wanted to comment as well.
Yeah, thank you, Zakia, and thank you for your question, Councillor Kushner. I've, for the last 10 years or so, I worked with young Muslims on university and college campuses in cities across Canada, from Vancouver to Halifax. And one of the things that I saw as they participated in various kinds of civic engagement programs was many of them were graduating and then continuing to remain civically involved, whether volunteering with the local community organization, donating to various civic institutions, voting, participating in public life in different ways. But we also see at the same time that some Muslims who are active in university and college, we also see disillusionment. And we see, I have seen, for example, one young woman who tried to get a job with a political party and serve in a community engagement role, that she experienced a very difficult workplace that was very discriminatory, did not listen to her suggestions, did not hear her concerns, and kind of didn't provide opportunities for her where she could take her education in political science and feel like she was growing and applying it. And she was telling me at one point, I think I need to become more radical. And I don't think I'll ever work for a political party again. And I think that's not something specific to Muslim young people. That's a challenge with young Canadians that are sort of finding challenges in participation, in civic participation, in political participation. And so I think, that's why one of our calls for action to address Islamophobia is to say, young people of different backgrounds, Muslim and non-Muslim, who have historically been underrepresented in city-based decision-making, that there should be some kind of leadership development opportunity for them, whatever it would be called. We'd love to share models of success and best practices around this. But for example, in the city of Toronto, we have leadership programs like this for Jewish youth, for Black youth, for Muslim youth, LGBTQ youth. And so we understand that whenever young people do get opportunities like this, they thrive. And so we would recommend that one way to address sort of some young people kind of seeming to be missing in action is to develop these kind of leadership programs. Thank you.
Thank you. You've mentioned London. My grandchildren go to school or went to school in the area where the hate crime took place. And like everybody else, they were very, very traumatized. And it was so sad for the community, including everyone. And I'm pleased that somehow we're taking action to remedy that. And I look at your recommendations and I find them very sound. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner.
Thank you.
And just building on Councillor Kushner's comment about youth and the Niagara College and Brock University, both of which attract a number of students from around the globe into our community. What I found as being in the position I'm in and being able to attend events and go to business openings, a lot of these young men and women who are part of the student union at Brock or Niagara College and are Muslim, they then emerge into entrepreneurship, which is beautiful to see. You see a lot of young people with that experience coming out of the college or university starting their own businesses here in our community. And I've had the good fortune to meet a lot of them, and that's another positive where we have to get the business community to provide mentorship opportunities as they continue to evolve in their entrepreneurial journeys as well. So just that connection, important connection between Brock and Niagara College when it comes to this as well. So seeing no further questions, Rizwan and Zakia, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to present. You've given us a lot of information, and this is something that we're going to continue to work on. And Rizwan, I can assure you that our council and our committees that will be working on this, you will start seeing action, and hopefully we can be included on the list that you talk to other communities about and saying this is what St. Catharines is doing in addition to London and Toronto and the other communities that are farther along on the curve. And we've got great leadership in Zakia, her role at the school board, her role within her community is really going to be an important catalyst for us moving forward as well. So I just want to say thank you for both of the presentations. And if I can have a mover to move the presentations, Councillor Kushner, seconded by Councillor Phillips, all in favor of the presentations. And then we have a staff recommendation. Councillor Porter, you're going to put the staff recommendation on the floor, seconded by Councillor Littleton on the staff recommendation. And I just want to have that on there. Any further comments on this? The only amendment I'd like to add is that also the Equity and Inclusion Committee be added as the endorsement part. And if possible, we have our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator, Shannon McHugh, who's joining us as well. So if you do have a question, and I'm sure Shannon could take that. So I got Councillor Miller, then Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, in terms of the street harassment policy, which I strongly support and I think is a great recommendation, I was under the impression our committee already recommended that and council endorsed that, or staff is coming back with a report on it next year. Is there an update on sort of the process, I suppose, around that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller, I believe there is something that's being looked at, and it is on the ORL. It's in the legal department.
Okay, so this would sort of merge in terms of that specific part, which I think is, again, was highlighted as sort of a key initiative for the city. This will sort of merge with that, I presume. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Williamson, you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Miller asked my question.
Okay.
We'll get the clarification I'm looking for.
Okay, Councillor Garcia.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a question through you to the mover, I guess. Should we be sharing this motion with all Niagara municipalities? Or?
Yeah, that's an easy amendment to make.
Yeah.
That's friendly.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no other further questions, I will call a question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
And Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
And that's carried.
Yes.
Mayor Senzak, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, and thank you again to the presenters. Looking forward to great work coming out of the committee on this as well. Okay, so we now have 9.2 Legal and Clerk Services. We have a request to be moved to discussion. Councillor Littleton has the motion being placed on the floor plus an amendment. Councillor Littleton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll wait for it to come up. This is my motion. So not the staff report, but I'm asking that council, as a shareholder for St. Catharines Hydro Inc., direct the board to review director compensation with the express consideration of removing compensation starting with the 2022 to 2026 term of council and report back at the next shareholder meeting. So I'm just going to give you, I had asked about this a couple of meetings ago, and it got moved off in some procedures, and now it's back before us. And I was told that actually as council we can't make this decision. We can ask the board to review its compensation, but we can't remove it ourselves. So many municipalities do not compensate their hydro board members, as you see in the report. When you look around Niagara, those who do are at a much less level than what we are currently paying. And I raised this issue. It's nothing to do with people that are there. So it's nothing. I want everyone to understand, remove that. I raised this issue just out of one of fairness. And I'm not about to start advocating for everybody to receive compensation for all boards they sit on, though that might be something that we eventually want to look at. But I just want to look at the amount of money. According to the report, in 2020, the chair received $9,600 and the directors each received $72.77. That's about 30% of what we earn as councillors. And if I did some math on that from the base plus the $205 honorarium per meeting, that looked like there was about 4 meetings in 2020. So in the next 6 weeks, the budget chair and myself, we will have 5 budget meetings, 3 virtual open houses, and 3 budget chair meetings. We get no extra compensation for any of that work, and that is 8 evenings away from my family. Now, I signed up for that. I said I will sit on that committee. I'm not complaining. I'm not asking for you to compensate me. What I'm asking for is asking for fairness in the interest of taxpayers, that to flow that remuneration back to taxpayers through the dividends, and we've set all that up through policies as council earlier this year. So that's what my motion is, asking the board to review that director compensation with the end goal of removing it, starting for the next term, not to do anything for this term, but for the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Any questions of this? Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting the amendment on the floor. I think that seeing how many hours and the time and commitment that goes into preparing for these meetings, there's a lot of time and a lot of effort that goes into this. So removing the remuneration would not be fair and fairness. If we do want to look at fairness, we do need to look at our commission and committees, commissions, boards, and agencies where councillors do sit on other boards. I sit on a number of other boards myself where I take time out of my day to volunteer and put my time forth on that. So we want to talk fairness. We need to look at what other municipalities do and how they compensate fairly the councillors who actually do put their names forward and sit on other boards. I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Any other further questions? Yeah. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, I just had a question to staff. I think it is on the outstanding reports list about remuneration for council generally. This is a slightly separate issue, but of course related. Due back, I think it says Q4 2021. So is there, noting that we're in Q4 2021, I'm just curious if there's an update on that. And in my opinion, they're related because I think as councillors, I will reiterate that I don't think we're compensated fairly in general. And obviously it makes it difficult to vote against compensation specific to the hydro board, although I agree sort of more broadly speaking with what Councillor Littleton's saying.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Miller, I believe there is a report coming back to you on general remuneration for councillors. I don't know exactly when, though. I can't get it up on my screen right now.
Okay, and I think it's only timely as long as it's ahead of, I think, the registrations for next year's municipal election, because I think part of that is we want to encourage more people to run. I guess just one question, I don't know who could answer this, but perhaps who compiled the report, I suppose. What is the logic to the compensation for hydro board members. And the only thing I'm curious about is that for most of the members, we pick them from council, so it's not as if we're trying to encourage better candidates or more experienced candidates. So we have a fairly limited pool as is, and I think we're all relative equals here. So I'm just curious if there's a logic to why they're compensated beyond work they put in, which, as Councillor Townsend pointed out, lots of people do on other boards.
I'll go to Director Salter on this one.
Sorry for the delay. I was looking for the information the councillor was asking for on the ORL. In this particular case, I believe that I'm not sure that I can answer the question, councillor. I don't know historically how the compensation was determined. I think it has been in place for quite some time. The only reference is that the increases to the compensation are in accordance with the formula used for council. So I think that the compensation goes back historically to the board earlier to my involvement with it. I'd have to look into it to really give you a detailed answer on that, councillor.
Is there, thank you for that through the chair, is there additional fiduciary duty that this board has that, say, other boards that manage big money, Performing Arts Center, Transit Commission, Library, don't have?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because this is a business corporation, yes, there is a fiduciary duty for the members of this board.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kushner, had your hand up? Okay, Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I want to say that I will be supporting this motion. If you put this out to the public and described how many meetings this board has compared to some of the other boards that some of the other councillors sit on, we would be hard pressed to defend this. And so this is not to say that there would be no compensation. I just think just because we've done something forever doesn't mean we can't take a look at what's fair. This is a time when we're asking our staff to sharpen their pencils like never before. I think the community is in the same boat and we need to look at our compensation as well. I think there's a way of making this fair and perhaps coming out with a per diem or some other compensation for councillors who sit on other boards and committees. That's a little bit fair as well, and it makes it a little bit easier. Some council colleagues work various hours, and going to a committee meeting or a board meeting might mean that they give up a shift somewhere. So I think it's only fair that all of the boards should have some kind of reasonable compensation, but $7,000 to $9,000 for 4 meetings a year, it seems like a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Williamson, and then Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll not get into the broader discussion about council remuneration, that kind of stuff. And I'm always supportive of us examining practices and making improvements and trying to make things fair. I won't support what's in front of us in this motion since it's something that's basically predetermined the outcome in its wording. I support a review, but not one that already states up front that we're going to remove compensation entirely. I'll limit my comments to that. We can get into the broader discussion when it comes back. Thank you.
Councillor Harris?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to explain a few things. We were a little bit hung up on the idea of 4 meetings. I know I personally put in a lot more time than 4 meetings. I spend numerous hours at the generating station, reviewing all the invoices, signing all the checks. So I'm a little bit insulted about the idea that that's what's paid for 4 meetings. The other thing is too, if we want to justify to people how we're remunerated, I would suggest, is Adam Smith on this call?
Director Douglas is.
Okay, it would be really nice for either Director Douglas or Adam Smith to come back to council and explain how many or how much money we've saved over the years by reducing the board complement by, I think, 9 individuals and actually bringing all the management in-house. I would imagine it's roughly around $300,000 a year. Could you comment on that?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I don't have the financial particulars in front of me to be able to.
Could you guess? Could you guess?
I don't feel comfortable doing that. I don't have the information in front of me to speak to those figures at this time.
Well, maybe we could speak to how much was saved when we looked into the spillway gates or the trash gates. Could you comment on that?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I don't have that information available with me this evening either.
It was 1.2 million per gate, so that was 4.8 million. Well, I guess just a ballpark. If we took 9 board members off and even times it by 6,000 per year, we'd probably come up with a number. Perhaps. I'm just wondering, like, we came up with this report, but I think it's only half the story. So is there anyone that can actually comment on it that's on this call?
So I think the director's just saying she doesn't have the information in front of her, so she doesn't want to make a comment on a number that then is into public record. So I think we just have to respect the fact that she doesn't have the exact information concurrently, but she could probably provide it after the fact.
Okay. Can I ask that this motion be broken into 2?
Yep, so split the motion.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification.
Councillor?
In the report that we have, we are comparing municipal councils who get full-time salaries, comparison to the Niagara regional municipals who get part-time. Is that correct?
So clarification for the author of the report. Again, do we know who's the author of the report? Kristen?
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
The author of the report was Kristen Sullivan, and the information that was supplied in the report was the information that council requested.
The question was, do we know out of the information that was provided the full-time councillors versus the part-time councillors or quarter-time councillors?
No, that is not information that we were asked to collect.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, to the point, some of the reasons why they don't get remuneration is because they're paid as full-time councillors, which offsets them having to sit in on other meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to comment on the motion. I'm on that board, and as Councillor Harris, our chair, has pointed out, we have saved an awful lot of money to the corporation. We also have, as the city solicitor pointed out, a different type of fiduciary responsibility being a public corporation. We do bring a lot of money to the city every year in addition to those savings. And there is a long history, as she also pointed out, I don't know how long, but I'm sure Councillor Kushner knows, of some remuneration for the people on this board. It doesn't matter whether it's me or any other councillor, but I think it should stay that way, so I can't support the motion as it is. One other point that I don't think Councillor Harris mentioned is that in addition to reducing drastically the number of board members and therefore that payment, we also no longer have senior dedicated staff to St. Catharines Hydro, which we used to have before we reduced the board, and now we just share some of the city staff for those responsibilities. So as I said, I cannot support the motion as is because I think that whether it's me or any other councillor, some remuneration should stay.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to indicate that the numbers that were given to us by Councillor Harris, as I recall, are quite correct. And I know as a councillor, years ago when we were a commission, we were not paid a stipend, but when we're incorporated to work as a private entity, that's when compensation came in. And at that time was a very, very demanding job. And we had all kinds of issues, including mergers, and I thought we handled them very well. And now we see considerable dividends being paid to the city by the corporation. However, now I find the workload to be minimal compared to what we had years ago, but at the same time, I find the work done by Councillor Harris to be very considerable, and therefore I would ask that the third part of the first sentence be taken out. That is, with the express consideration of removing compensation be removed from the motion.
Okay, I'll move to the mover. Was that a friendly and it can't be an amendment because it's contrary to the spirit of the motion, so it can't be voted on. But if it's a friendly, it could be changed. If not, it doesn't stay on the floor.
Given that I want it to be reviewed and hearing the comments from councillors saying that they would like it looked at as well, then I'm okay with removing those few words.
Okay, so the few words exactly, Councillor Kushner, so we get the strikeout. Can you tell us? I just want to make sure Evan has the right.
Strike out with the express consideration of removing compensation starting with the 2022-26 term of council.
So why wouldn't you leave starting with the 2022-26? That means you want to get a decision before we head into the next term unless you want this to continue for the next term.
Well, we can leave that in, Mr. Mayor.
So leave the starting with 2022-26 term of council. Because that's the ultimate goal of the mover is it's not to take effect in this term of council. It's for the next term of council. Okay. Councillor Porter, you've already spoken, so I'm not going to let you, unless it's a clarification, because
I guess I have a report request for later. I don't know when I can bring that up, but it is related to who's doing the work of the Hydro Board. It sounds like, we just put it on staff, but I would like to know what that means at some point. So maybe at the next Hydro AGM, which I think is in December, possibly.
Bring it up under other business and make a note of that one. Okay, seeing no other further questions, we can now vote on this motion. And it's a split. Councillor Harris, do you want it to continue to be split with the wording taken out?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll go with the first one to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
And that's carried. On the second half of the motion, Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right, so we move on, and we have 9.3, which is being brought off consent by Councillor Garcia. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Garcia for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are you moving the staff recommendation?
I think if we can put the staff recommendation up, I just have some questions and comments.
Okay, so moving it, we have Councillor Phillips move it and seconded by Councillor Miller. Okay, so it's on the floor.
Okay, so I raised one key question already with staff this afternoon, but I want to mention it again, Mr. Mayor, and that is This is regarding the 75 Niagara recommendation. So we're saying that we're going to add 12 rental units, and I asked specifically, are these or any of them affordable rental units? And the answer has been no. And I don't know if any of you have read recent articles, but I read recent articles that say that all of a sudden in the last few years we have matured, if that's the right word, into St. Catharines being one of the least affordable rental markets in the country, and very high up there. When I did some research today, I understand a one-bedroom average rental right now is about $1,450. I mean, I remember not too long ago you could get a one-bedroom in the city for $700 or $800. So it's a huge change, and I'm concerned that this project is being recommended. And when we talked about the CIP 2020, my understanding was that one of the driving forces was that we wanted to have it be a driver for affordable housing. So this project is not providing affordable housing. The remediation component is pretty minor, like if I read it correctly, the total remediation costs are projected at $190,000, yet we're recommending a $90,000 taxpayer subsidy, so almost 50% of the remediation cost. So I'm concerned about how our rating system works.
Do you have a question that you want to ask staff?
Yeah, the question that I want to ask staff is it appropriate to give the project 10 points for mixed use when there's living units, but there is no affordable housing?
So I'll go to Director Kitte, and if she can provide some opening comments, because I don't want the public to be misled that this is not following the criteria. So if you can do an overview of the project itself, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Council. 75 Niagara Street is a proposed 12-unit rental building. They have applied for a BTIF incentive to provide a rebate of 80% of the annual property taxes paid after the project completion up for a period of 10 years. Should this Councillor Garcia is correct that this application does not have an affordable housing category in it. If it did, if it had 30% of the units meeting the definition of affordable in the plan, then it would have qualified for more. We would have been coming to council seeking more money than what we actually are. So the report identifies that staff can support the application. It meets the criteria in the council approved community improvement plan, and the criteria set is very clear, it's very transparent. It's also attached to the subject report this evening on how things are graded, and council approved that criteria, and that's what we use when we look at applications. So yes, it's true that this does not include affordable housing. If it didn't, it would be getting a higher amount of rebate. The application tonight in front of council, we're not seeking approval for the application itself. It is delegated to staff. The reason why it's in front of council this evening is because it goes beyond what we had originally projected for how much we would be spending in year one of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask staff, and I think maybe this is just direction to staff or to include under financial implications, because this commitment would, with the commitment to Lincoln Fabrics, puts us over the planned budget, I guess. They say that preliminary estimates indicate an unfavorable reserve balance. However, this is depending on, and this report as addressing whether it violates what we have or not is scheduled to be back to council in the first quarter of 2022. I also understand from the senior planner that one of the commitments we have, if I remember, is to have an annual report on how CIP is progressing and how we're implementing the plan. So I would just like to ask staff to, as part of either the annual report or that report that comes back in the first quarter of 2022, to do an assessment of whether the threshold of 50% that we put, or 50 points out of 100 that we put in that plan is working well, because I'm concerned that this project, for example, just barely gets over the line of 52, and that's because of that 10 points for the mixed use. So I'm just asking, will they, when they report back, if they could address the issue of, do they feel that the threshold that was recommended in the plan is working well, or whether it should be changed?
I'll look to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, and then maybe I'll pass it to Director Cathay. It's my understanding that the annual review of the program actually will be looking at the effectiveness of the program itself. So if you're asking for the annual report when it comes back to look at the overall objectives being met within the establishment of the 2020 program, then I would think that would be included in the report. But
definitely, thank you. And specifically, whether the threshold perhaps should be changed or not.
And to Director Kitse, in terms of the 2022 report, we just approved the CIP. If you can refresh our memory, was it November of last year?
Through the Mayor, yes, that's correct. Council approved the 2020 CIP in November of last year.
So how many, for the 2022 update, how many projects will have been approved under the new model? I think this is the first one, is it not? Followed by...
Through the Mayor, this would be the second one.
Second one. Should be a short report, since we don't have a lot of projects. Councillor Miller.
The one thing I kind of had to take issue with, and it's with all due respect to Councillor Garcia, because it was probably just a turn of phrase, but the idea that the rental market is out of control all of a sudden is just very wrong. It's a global issue we're seeing, but it's also out of control because of decisions that have been made in this room for a very long time. And I think the idea that we've been in the top 10 for rental rates in Canada for at least the last 6 years. And one of the reasons is, and I appreciate what Councillor Garcia is saying, because I think a lot of people view the new CIP as an affordable housing program, but it's not just a social housing program. We need more rental units in general. And I think why I personally like this project is because of the mixed use. We need to see more of that. It helps our small businesses that occupy those spaces. But it helps people live near places they can shop and work too, and it adds rental units. And I say Thorold's done a great job of adding rental units above commercial spaces. It's something we need to do. I know staff, and I know Councillor Lillis and I had an opportunity to talk with this particular developer and brought up affordable units. They're open to looking into it, which obviously doesn't necessarily mean a lot. But we have to keep in mind too that this is 12 units, and what that means is that changing 2 of them to social housing units is a huge amount of the total development, and that we're not going to solve the rental crisis with this particular unit. We need to keep making good, consistent decisions all the way through. I think the one issue that I've always raised with our CIP when it comes to rental rates is that we are using the market rate minus or within, I think it's like 5 or 10%, which is still significantly out of reach for people renting. But again, I think this is the issue when we view these on a case by case. That I think we can find fault in all of them. But what's good about this project is the density. It's the area. We're not talking about the waterfront in Port Dalhousie. We're talking about downtown Niagara and Welland Street, which could use some interest in development and more people living there, which hopefully will help more commercial businesses succeed in that area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Well said. Councillor Garcia. Oh, sorry. I was looking at Councillor Kushner. Your hand goes up all the time, so I thought you were...
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because I agreed with Councillor Garcia, you don't have to call me Garcia. Thank you. But my question is, in the report, we indicate that the one project would be looked at over 3 years, and this project would be looked at over 10 years. Why the difference?
Director Kitse or Ms. Semple?
Through the mayor, I'm going to defer that to the CIP coordinator.
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor, it's because it's two different incentives. One is a brownfield tax assistance incentive, and one is a brownfield tax increment financing incentive. And they have two different payout timelines under the CIP plan.
Okay, if they both had the same time span, what would be the difference in cost?
I don't know if they're mathematicians, but I guess
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, these are two different CIP programs. So the program that we're seeking to be, the approval we're seeking to be revoked was under the previous CIP, and that would be the 3-year BTA. And the one that we're asking council to approve the funding for is under the new 2020 CIP for a BTIF for 75 Niagara. So it's two different sites, two different programs under, two different approvals under two different CIP programs, 5 years apart.
Okay, and my next question is, do we have a glut of commercial in the downtown?
So I don't know if that's germane to these, be maybe under other business, you could ask about commercial, but I think we're just looking for the approval on the BTIF and the removal of the BTA on 10 Pleasant. So if we could just keep it to these reports, it'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, because I know where you're going with it, and you're probably correct in your assumption, but I think that's a further discussion that we can have. Seeing no further questions on this?
Mr. Mayor, can we split the...
You do whatever you want, Councillor. If you want to split it, we can split them.
Thank you.
So we'll deal with the first one first, which is the one that Evan's going to highlight. Or Council Coordinator McGinty. We do have seconder. It's Councillor Miller. Okay. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Just Councillor Littleton's going to.
Sorry, Councillor Littleton. I didn't see. I thought I saw your hand up, and then.
That's okay. I just wanted to say something before we go to the vote, because obviously it is in our ward, and Councillor Miller was excellent in his comments. And I do, as a landlord, normally I can't talk about every time there's something that comes up, apartment buildings or what have you. I have a conflict, so I never am able to say anything. But I think, as someone who's been in the rent as a landlord since 2009, I have experienced the changes. I've seen the changes, and I've seen how they've been hurting people with the lack of rental units. We always say a rental market, yet we seem to not understand that it is a market. A few years ago, there was a cauliflower shortage, and the price of cauliflowers was like $7 a cauliflower, and everybody was like, why is it so expensive? Because there wasn't many cauliflowers. And that's the same that's happening now with rental units. There aren't a lot of rental units. So if you rewind and go back 10 years ago, this is just to explain just what just market. If you're like, why is she talking about cauliflowers? It's just very simply, 10 years ago, if I had an apartment rental that I had an apartment or a unit that came vacant, and I put it on the market, I might get 3 weeks of showings. It might take 3 weeks of showings. I might get 21 people, maybe 20 people. Half of them would show up. That was the market at that time. There was a lot of units. There was a lot of choice for people. The price was lower. Over time, lack of new builds, lack of, or the exit of units into Airbnbs, et cetera, are all market forces, which has caused this tightening. So now, if I have a rental unit that comes available, one showing, back-to-back applications come in all on top, offering me more money than I never take it. Offering more money, offering perks, offering that. It's awful. I feel terrible for people that come, but this is the market they're subjected to. If we can get 12 more units in the market, it opens the market. That's all it is. We need to have more units. And yes, we need when we mean affordable housing, we are talking subsidized housing. We need that as well. but we need the units to come into the market so we have places for people to live, so they don't have to fall over each other and try to just get a space to live. That's a human right. And so I support the BTIF application for this, and I hope that my council colleagues will as well.
The two ward councillors spoke very astutely on the issues facing this, and that's why I think this application is a perfect example of how this can be applied to a BTIF and create rental units, which is much needed in our community. So with that, now the question will be called. To the first one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, 75 Niagara. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
No, I support rental units, but not the incentive.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
No.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Mayor Sendzik.
Supporting rental units in St. Catharines, yes.
And that's carried.
All right, so the second one, which I don't think is going to be a contentious one, unless go to the clerk. I think we've all been waiting for this one.
10 Pleasant Avenue. Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimous.
Okay, 10.1, we have Councillor Phillips, who's stepping up with Port Weller East Employment Lands. There's a lot of whereases, and I think Councillor Phillips is going to summarize and then go to the therefores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you said, I'm not going to go through all the whereases. This was on the council agenda earlier this week, so I'll go to the therefore be it resolved and make a couple of comments afterwards. Therefore be it resolved, the Council of City of St. Catharines requests that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to apply a minister's zoning order to the lands municipally known as 406 Lakeshore Road in the City of St. Catharines in the region of Niagara for the long-term projection of employment lands, and be it further resolved that the minister's zoning order for 406 Lakeshore Road order a general employment E2 zone as defined and regulated by the city's zoning bylaw 2013-283 as amended to the property. Mr. Mayor, as we all know, the employment lands in St. Catharines are becoming in short supply. 406 Lakeshore Road remains as a large parcel that could be desirable in the very near future due to the proximity to the Welland Canal and to the QEW. There are actually new ships being built right now for the Great Lakes to carry containers, which has never happened before. Containers would be offloaded in Montreal or Halifax, where now there are ports in the Great Lakes that are going to be unloading containers, and perhaps this would be something down the road that this might happen. Perhaps, I'm not saying that. Mr. Mayor, you and I and senior staff met with the Vice President of Algoma in the past week. I'd like to brag of the fact that he is a St. Catharines born and bred, educated person, and he's risen to become Vice President of Algoma, and we're all very proud of that. But in that discussion, they were very optimistic towards the future of shipping in the Great Lakes and the marine strategy that we're asking the provincial government to develop, along with the fact that this land be kept as employment lands, could benefit St. Catharines greatly in the future as far as good paying jobs are concerned. It's vital that the minister's zoning order keep 406 Lakeshore as general employment and as an E2 zone in the future, and as regulated by our bylaw. And to me, it's very important that this happens. It's a zone that could be developed and benefit our city greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. I know you worked with Councillor Dodge as ward mates, and this is a great example of that. Councillor Kushner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The staff report is extremely comprehensive, but I'd like to make some comments that are a bit different. The rezoning of GM and West St. Catharines properties are critical to the future of this city, as is the present zoning of Port Weller lands, which is the subject of this evening's detailed motion, which calls for a minister's zoning order to protect these lands as employment lands. The Port Weller lands are not only significant for the city of St. Catharines, but also, as pointed out in the report, significant from federal perspective because the lands are adjacent to a federal marine shipyard. The city's position received widespread support, including support by the dry docks and the Niagara Industrial Association, as well as the unanimous support of city and regional councils. What is most unfortunate, and I'm going to say appalling, is that the owners of the property decided to appeal the citywide Official Plan Amendment 26, which was based on a 4-year comprehensive land needs assessment. Normally, the developer would appeal a portion of the plan which refers to their property only. In the mediation process with the developer, I understand they are given the opportunity to do so, but instead declined to have the other properties scoped from their appeal. And as a result, the development of the GM and West St. Catharines lands are on hold. In West St. Catharines, Ellis Dawn is shovel-ready for a major health complex, which could be the impetus for a healthcare cluster that you find in U.S. cities such as Boston and Cleveland. In addition, we have the former GM lands, which are not only an eyesore, but environmentally problematic. And the province is on record to provide 1 million new dwelling units in the next 10 years. And if we don't proceed in an expeditious manner, we will not have the affordable housing that St. Catharines and the province desperately needs. Therefore, Mr. Mayor, we have to send a strong message to the developer and to the province that we concur with the province's goal to provide additional housing while at the same time protecting employment lands to ensure long-term prosperity. By doing so, we are also sending a message to budding landowners that we will protect their current operations and their ability to expand. In my opinion, the developer should be embarrassed that they have an appeal process to scope, that is, to delete the other lands from their appeal, but instead they are jeopardizing the other developments and much-needed housing in the city. Sad to say that the owners, apparently based on planning advice, are willing to sacrifice our prosperity in both the short term and long term using an appeal that, in my opinion, has no merit. In effect, the planners for the Port Weller lands are holding the other property owners hostage, and in so doing are surely an insult to their profession. Accordingly, this evening we are making a unique request to have the province intervene to protect significant municipal, provincial, and federal employment lands. We have no other choice but to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. And that's probably the most passionate that I've seen you in a while, and it reminds me never to get on your bad side.
Coming.
That's good. Any other comments? Councillor Porter and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kushner was on fire, so I don't know. He said a lot of what I was going to say, but I was trying to say it in a nice way, and he was very direct, but hit all the points. I'm very shocked and surprised that this this is being held up, and there are appropriate times to have ministerial zoning orders, and this is most definitely one of them. We did everything. We followed all the steps. We did our land needs assessment, and the lands in that area, which are right next to the Port Weller dry docks, which run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's federally important as a shipping corridor, and it is provincially significant as employment lands. We are following provincial policy in the way that we have determined that we needed to zone all of these lands. It is very appropriate to reach out to the minister to fix this situation because, as Councillor Kushner said, it is holding up the GM secondary plan, and it is very frustrating. We've already budgeted for this. The community's been waiting over 10 years to see something happen on this property, and it is absolutely ridiculous. It's being held up, and it's for a low-density suburban development in a very bad place. That's not the plan that they're appealing and that they want to move forward. Would be low-density housing in a place that doesn't have transit, isn't near a school, isn't near a library, and is right next to employment lands. It doesn't make sense when we could be moving forward with our secondary plan on the GM lands, which is near a 400 series highway, a place on a transit route, and we could build a lot of great housing and clean up a brownfield. So we really do need the minister to get involved, and I'm not sure if we can make a friendly amendment, but I would like to see our staff and the mayor follow up with Minister Clark on this as soon as possible. Thank you.
That'll be direction. Thank you. A lot of passion here. I love it. It's an important issue. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, I don't like taking the stage now. I do appreciate the Freaky Friday we're having where Councillor Kushner is being uninhibited in his passion. And Councillor Porter said she was going to go out of her way to be nice. So that was interesting to see. I just wanted to note, I think Councillor Porter has sort of hit this, but the minister's zoning orders have been controversial in other places because they've been seen to override local decision making. In this case, we're asking them to actually support local decision making. I think Councillor Phillips was right to point out that both City Council and the region unanimously supported what we're asking to do. So just for clarification, almost for the public's sake, that though MZOs have been controversial in the past, it is specifically for the opposite reason of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them to support local decision making. So thank you.
And we'll hear from the expert, Director Kitse, if you just want to validate that, because you're closest to the file on this. I don't know, your mic's, it doesn't say muted, but.
I'm sorry, are you able to hear me now?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, thank you. Through the mayor to council, the motion that is on the screen right now and being discussed very much seeks to cement the city's position in terms of protecting long-term employment uses around a 24/7 operating dry dock operation that is also directly adjacent to a federal corridor for goods movement. And I think that's the intent of what the motion speaks to. It's implementing provincial policy. It's implementing as well as supporting our businesses in their community, in our community for their future growth.
All right. Councillor Miller, you're good? All right. All right, look, with that, I'll just call the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend.
Yes.
Councillor Cisco.
Yes.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
Yes.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
And Mayor Sendzik.
Yes.
Carried unanimously.
All right, thank you, Councillor Phillips, for bringing this forward. Greatly appreciated, and thank you, councillors, for the comments. And I'm hoping they're being heard loud and clear. All right, calls for notice is a motion. Councillor Porter, you got a call for notice of motion for the next meeting?
That's correct. It's having council endorse a national child care program, and it's calling on the province to sit down with the federal government and work out a bilateral agreement and endorse the recent motion at the region.
Okay. Councillor Garcia, RR 87.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will have that fleshed out for the the meeting, just to want the region to consider burying the utility lines as part of that reconstruction.
So just for verification, what part of RR 87 is that? The one where we've already gone through the EA with, or is that further?
Yeah, where the EA is.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect. Thank you for that. And Councillor Miller.
Yeah, we, Armstrong Strategy Group, which is a strong St. Catharines connection, released a municipal democracy index of Ontario's largest municipalities. St. Catharines didn't score very well on a couple key indicators, so I'm going to bring a motion forward that we look to correct that, especially going into the election next year.
Yeah, I was reviewing that. It'd be interesting to have them even come in and talk, because I think there's a lot of interesting assumptions or lack of data that was in there. Not saying if we were number one, we'd be singing from the rooftops, but the fact that we weren't, I think it's a good intention, but I think learning from it will be a good way of doing it as well. All right. Report requests. Sorry, any other notice of motion?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a little bit peculiar. But in our correspondence tonight, there's a very thoughtful plan brought forward by Kiwanis Eco Park. Mr. Len Bates had asked to delegate at tonight's meeting, but according to our new procedural rules, some other reasons, he wasn't allowed to. So my notice of motion would be that for the next meeting, that Mr. Len Bates be allowed to speak to the Kiwanis Eco Park that's in the correspondence tonight.
Is there a staff report that will be accompanying the presentation?
Can I speak to this?
Staff can get a report together, but in the past, we didn't refuse people the opportunity to speak if council wanted to hear individuals, particularly an important local service club that's really coming to the table with some thoughtful plans
I know okay. Because I know I've met with Len Bates. I know Councillor Porter's met with Len Bates, and I think Councillor Dodge has worked with, like he's already working with a number of councillors, and last discussion I had with him, he was fine with the direction, which was working through staff, coming back with more information, but I don't know if I don't even think he wants to delegate anymore. I think that letter was just sent in to get attention.
Okay, I haven't had a lot of time to work on this, but that was what had transpired during the day today. And I didn't get to it till this afternoon because of work commitments, of course. So can we just leave it, and then maybe we could figure it out before the next meeting?
Yeah, I think if we can have a meeting beforehand, because I think we're all on the same page. It's just how are we going to get there kind of thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, report requests. We got Councillor Porter and Councillor Cisco. Who wants to take that one? Councillor Cisco, do you want to take that? It's Coronation Boulevard.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. It's I just sort of request a report request to staff about stop signs. Residents have reached out with some serious concerns at the corner, so the intersection of Dufferin and George, as well as at along Vanceville Road North. And Vanceville Road North was one of the areas we had traffic calming last year, so hoping for a report back from staff with respect to stop signs at those locations.
Okay. Now I'm just going to look to the CAO in terms of the stop signs. Those are staff delegated. Is there a way that we can get information, or is this because the stop signs weren't installed? I'm looking to the CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd have to defer to Mr. Martuccio, but you're correct that it is delegated to staff. But in these situations, when there's requests made forward, I believe staff have been part of this discussion to bring something back to council.
Next one is Councillor Porter, tree management protection policy.
Yes, thank you. It's a report request on tree management, tree protection, with a particular focus on construction, the feasibility of a fee-for-service agreement with the region, just to see if that's even feasible, and a report on mandatory tree planting on boulevards. Right now, it seems as if residents have to request getting a tree that was taken down replaced, and if a resident doesn't request it, it can leave certain streets barren. So, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Miller, do you have a report request?
Yeah, sort of. The minutes we passed tonight included a motion from the LGBTS2S Plus Committee regarding the harmful effects of conversion therapy and how some municipalities are taking steps to ban it within the municipality. It was sort of asking council to approve those minutes, and now I understand from the clerk's office made a good point that we don't really have a staff member maybe who could report back on this. I think some of it has to do with possible bylaws banning certain types of business, but I think that would be a regional matter. So I think I'm going to connect with the clerk's office on how we follow up with these minutes, presuming we pass them, and how we affect what the committee wants us to do, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Williamson, do you have your hand up again for a report? No? Okay, great. Okay, so that's it for the reports. Just motion to approve all the report requests. Motion by Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Littleton. All in favor? That is carried.
Mr. Mayor, some clarification from the clerk, please. I made a report request at a previous council meeting regarding hanging flower baskets for Port Lucie. And just like now, I thought we just approved the report request at the time, but now I see that we have it on the council agenda for tomorrow to approve the report request. We've already been through it. I'm confused.
To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe your report request would have went to the budget committee tomorrow, to council tomorrow. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it said that that staff prepare a report for the budget committee identifying the issues, I forget the exact wording, that to ensure that hanging flower baskets are addressed in Port Lucie as they always have been, or something to that effect. But, you know, I've met with city staff since then just because of the request, so it's all in process, and now all of a sudden I see that we have to vote on it tomorrow. I don't get it.
It would be an official process because the budget committee hasn't voted on the report request. So that'll just be the budget committee endorsing the report request.
So when we make a report request here that involves a report to the budget committee, they have to vote on it separately? Is that
correct?
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Well, it's because they have to judge if they want to add it to their work plan. And they could, and I don't see why they were not going to, but it's an ask to them to include it in their work plan. Councillor Porter?
I'm sorry, I thought the report request tomorrow was Councillor Sorrento's report request.
Oh, I think it was building on Councillor Garcia's because Councillor Sorrento amended it to include Facer Street.
Okay.
And then I think Councillor Miller said Meriton. And then I think Councillor Phillips said Grantham. So, and then Councillor Kushner said St. Andrews. So there's going to be a lot of flower planters around. Just kidding. But that's why I think the extension is. Okay, so that's it. We have task force minutes and motion to receive and file the minutes of the advisory committees of council as presented. Can I have a motion? Councillor Townsend, second by Councillor Dodge. All in favor? That is carried. We go into closed session. For a closed session, the Deputy Mayor will take this session, and I will just ask if the Deputy Mayor can run through the meeting, the remainder of the meeting, so I don't have to come back in. That'd be appreciated. I'll clear my seat here. Then hopefully everybody has a wonderful evening. I know where Councillor Miller is going because he's not wearing a suit and tie today.
Hey.
session for a proposed or pending disposition of land by the municipality or local board, part of McKay Street, Realty file number 21-040. By attending the closed session, each member acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to the confidentiality of closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present at the meeting. This includes that members are not permitted to record the proceedings and must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That council move into closed session for the reason noted by the city clerk, and that members of council acknowledge their obligations under the Code of Conduct during the closed session. Moving the motion to closed session, I have Councillor Garcia. And can I have a show of hands? So moved. Councillors will now be moved into the closed calling council back to order. Motion arising from the closed session. Financial management services, property management, property matter disposal, part of McKay Street Realty file number 2104, closed session report pursuant bylaw 2021-124, section H3.1CA, proposed or pending disposition of land by the municipality or local board. And the recommendation, the council approved the staff recommendation contained in report FMS 168-2021 regarding a proposed property disposition, Realty file number 21-040. And can I get a councillor to move this? Councillor Kushner, thank you very much. And a seconder, thank you, Councillor Phillips. And all in favor? Oh, okay, sorry, it has to be a recorded vote.
Councillor Dodge, sorry, I called you first.
Yes.
Councillor Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Harris? He's sleeping? Okay. Councillor Harris? Oh.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
No.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
And that's carried.
Moving on to the reading of the bylaws, that the bylaws listed on council agendas A to G be read a first time, considered and passed, and that they be signed and executed by the mayor and the city clerk. Moving the motion, I have Councillor Porter, and seconding it, I have Councillor Littleton. And I'll look to the clerk to call the vote.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Councillor Cisco?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
That's carried.
So our final item is we have a motion that there being no further items of business, this meeting be adjourned.
Madam Chair?
Oh, sorry.
May I ask a question of the CAO before we go? We don't have the CAO updates on COVID anymore, so I would have asked you at the time, but the province just announced all these capacity limitation changes, like for the Meridian Center and the PAC and so on. Will that impact council chambers in terms of who we can have here? Have you looked at that, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have in fact looked at that. It does not apply at this stage for the capacity limits. It's just strictly for spectator venues. You could look at it one of two ways. We've looked at it from, it's a meeting room, so we're still subject to the same.
Thank you.
Okay, so now getting back to the adjournment, that there be no further items of business, this meeting be adjourned. Moving this motion, I have Councillor Williamson, and seconded, I have Councillor Cisco. Can I get a hands verbal? Yes, everybody? Thank you. Pass unanimously.